we go. Here we go.
We are live.
Hey, let's start it totally in English.
Totally in English.
Just to variar.
Oh.
Just to variar un poco. So dumb.
You're so,
I don't know why we have
you're
the
so
same,
stupid.
same stupid humor. Here we are, Sunday leftovers. It is only 100 degrees out,
Yeah.
but this is how, you know how you handle Texas heat?
How?
Just like a bad neighbor. You just act like it's not there. Just act like it's not there.
One of
What
my
heat?
one of my one of my uncles.
Yeah.
He said, "Everything is in your mind."
Everything is in your mind.
okay.
Absolutely everything.
Yeah,
He wasn't
everything's-
wrong. He was right. Yeah. Here we go. Sunday leftovers.
Yeah.
So we started a
New series.
a new piercing series with a really fun graphic that you designed. Flannel graph. Swedish Jesus with puffy little cotton ball beards and all this stuff. Anyway, started a new series, and I think it's going to be fun.
Well,
It's going to be fun.
explain to the people. For sure, there's people watching now or maybe later that they don't have a single idea about what it's about. The new.
Yeah, out of
this new
the
series is
4
about.
people that watch this, you think there's anyone who hasn't?
I don't know. Maybe.
I don't mean to insult you if you've tuned us in. No. It's a series that we're calling Wait What? Bible Stories for Grown-Ups. And it really is going back and sitting finally with the stories that we grew up on, that we grew up hearing in the church, but sitting with them again, because here's what I've noticed. Jonah and the whale and the ark, Noah, saving every living organism on earth in a wooden boat, and, a global flood, and Sodom and Gomorrah being about whatever, sin or whatever, all these things. These were formative stories that shaped my little brain and my little heart.
Yeah.
But I've
mine too.
noticed over time that we've got a motorcycle sneaking up right behind us.
Yes.
I've noticed over time that I'm somewhat less willing to preach on them or even discuss them because they feel unbelievable, would be the word that I would use. Now, there's great power in admitting that something is awkward when it's awkward.
Right.
And so we're going back and we're going to sit with 6 or 7
It's good to
Sundays.
recognize that because tons of people, they feel in the same way.
They already
but
know it.
Sometimes they just don't name it. So when you said that, it's like for so many people,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a relief.
Yeah, and I have heard that from a lot of our people this week, and I could feel that on their faces on Sunday, that it's finally good to be hearing something spoken publicly that they've known for a really long time, which is that our faith is ancient. Our stories are ancient. They're not even our stories. They're Jewish stories, but our stories are ancient. But I took a few notes here. I'm just going to open my notes. Just because our stories are ancient doesn't mean they have to be naive. Doesn't mean they have to be even more profoundly anti-intellectual, right? So they can be old, but the way we hold them has a lot to do with how they continue to function. The way I've held them for the last 10 years of ministry is I just don't talk about them.
Okay.
I preach the words of Jesus, and if the lectionary doesn't force me out of that, I'm going to hover right there, because to me those are much easier to bring across the centuries. What's a little more
understand.
difficult is a dude gets swallowed by a fish because he doesn't want to go to Nineveh, and a literal 7-day creation in which God made these 2 people that he loved and then hated them because they chose to eat of something he put within arm's reach, like these ideas, right? And so our faith is ancient, but it doesn't have to be naive or limiting or anti-intellectual. And so, but what's going to happen is we're going to need to treat these stories again, speak about them again in a different way, bring them into a space that we've prepared sufficiently. And what I mean by that is we've been talking for a long time now about how do we look again at old things through new experiences, and how do we build that on the permission that says this is what discipleship is. It's not taking what you're told and disbelieving every other thing. It's actually working with these things that we're told in new ways to say, just like Peter did at Pentecost, oh wait, let's go back and look at that. Now so we've been working on this foundation for a long time. So we're going to go tell those stories again.
We in Christianity, we consider some disciplines more valid than other ones. Like if we elevate the historical value
right.
of everything. So in order to do that, Christians and evangelicals go to the Bible looking for that historical value
Right.
because something like, oh, this is true. That's why people, when someone discovers something in the Middle East, they say, oh, do you see? The Bible is true because they found whatever, which is not really a good thing to do. But,
yeah.
So they struggle with that. They affirm that the Bible is in that
Yeah.
exactly same way.
Yeah.
And then we create some kind of intellectual fundamentalism
Yep.
when people start to put arguments and everything, and for some time it looks fine, but eventually you realize this is
yeah.
just a castle made
Made
with
of sand.
cards or
Made with
sand.
cards, yeah. House of Cards, we would call that. Yeah,
House of Cards.
I'm already deeply into writing the sermon for next Sunday, where we're going to talk about Noah's Ark and the Great Flood. And here's what I think would be a good thing to keep in mind. Trust scientists while they're doing their science. Don't trust theologians who are dabbling in science so that they can find evidence of the story they want to believe. So trust actual scientists, and bring on the atheist scientists who aren't defending any one
Sure.
sacred document.
Sure.
If you're gonna find a chunk of wood somewhere in the Middle East and you're gonna tell me this is the remains of the Ark of Noah's Ark, I'm gonna take that straight to the clinic or straight to the laboratory of someone who's an atheist to have that tested, because I don't want you as a theological archaeologist to skew the data so that it can force it to say what you want it to say, which is
Right.
that this is trust hard scientists when it comes. And if you're a scientist in our audience and you found, I know there are many, strangely there are many, who find the way we deal with our text to be permission giving because they have lived always in the gap of real hard science and biblical mythology in these stories we were told. If you are one of those people, I want you to bring the full capacity of your imagination to bear
Right.
on how we hold these stories. I think they need to rest gently on us. I hate to say this, I don't even know if I should say this, but I'm proud of what we said, or what I said on Sunday, because I don't think we throw these stories away. We hold them, but we allow them to rest gently now in our consciousness because we know some things we didn't know then. That's not to say we know all things. Here's the
Yeah,
problem.
it's not the same.
The beginning of fundamentalism is to say, okay, we have all the things we need. Let's put bookends on it, and all we have to do is just keep track of these things. I don't want to become a new fundamentalist. Almost every Christian movement does. I don't know if I'll outrun it. I don't know that it's in the nature of generations to ever fully be wide open. But I don't want to become a new version of a fundamentalist. I want to hold these things gently on our consciousness now. Here's the governing piece to me of the book of Genesis. This is a magnificent and epic story that addresses the who and the why of the cosmos, not the how or the when.
Right.
When we try to extrapolate the Earth's age because of some genealogy that appears in Genesis 5, are you serious? There's a million things that doesn't account for.
Right.
This is how you end up with an Earth that's 6,006 years old or something ridiculous like this. And this is why you're forced to claim God made it to look old to fool us. Are you kidding? Are we not talking about a God who's self-revealing by nature, who's trying to woo and to... Here's the story of Genesis as far as I'm concerned. This is the story of who and why. This is the story of an animating force, call it God, call it Yahweh, call it Elohim, call it Spirit, call it whatever. It brooded over the deep or it got into the soil. This is the story of a deity that literally handmade a friend. I've never heard that said in church, and I've been in church for way too long. No one has ever said that to me. If we can let go of, is it literal, is it figurative, is it 7 days, just let it go. Let's allow this thing to be reintroduced to us. This is the story, at least it is in Genesis 2, I should say. It's the story of a deity that gets down into the dirt and hand makes a friend.
That's a very nice way to put it.
That's the story. That story has legs. That belongs in our consciousness. You know why? Because every friend you've ever had, you had to hand make. Friends don't happen. Friends are made. You and I have made our friendship over crisis and difficulty,
Right.
and begging for money. and begging the government to give us documents and
Let me stay here.
creative ways to get across borders and various and sundry unmentionables and things
yeah.
of that nature. So, how inspiring is it to remind ourselves that God made a companion? That is you. That is me. This isn't a story of original sin until St. Augustine gets a hold of it.
Yeah.
And so what are we doing in 2022 in South Austin, Texas, in the 78704 zip code? What are we doing? We're still picking through the ruins of the 3rd and 4th century when these mythological stories of the who and the why became literal ideas about the when and the how. And since Augustine said so, that directed the whole Western civilization in that direction, and I don't think we've moved the needle. We're going to need some help reinterpreting these old stories. These don't belong to us. These belong to the Jewish cosmology and to Jewish imagination. And interestingly enough, from what I'm reading, certainly through the books that I'm reading, I'm being helped to understand that the Jewish cosmology was never what we made it in the 3rd and 4th century. There was a sinister and nefarious reason why the Bible had to be taken literally as every word spoken by God. You can literally look at this in art history. Early versions of the writing of the Gospels, and there's many, the early versions had, the Holy Spirit in the room and these writers. But by the 3rd and 4th century, you've got Matthew and Mark and Luke, and you've got these angels over them literally writing these words of God. Well, it had to be that if you're going to control the masses. But you see,
Dictado mecánico.
that's right, mechanically dictated by God himself. God himself.
Yeah.
Forget everyone
Ipsissima
else.
verba Dei.
That's right. And the reality is, these are much grander texts than just literal. I argued this when I sat before a panel at seminary and argued for my biblical theology. This is far bigger than biblical literalism. This is so much bigger than literal. So I think there's an invitation
And
in
actually,
that.
to be honest, biblical literalism, so many people point us and say, these guys are heretics.
Yeah.
This is heresy.
Yeah.
Biblical literalism is heresy.
Well, it's also lazy, and it's also super easy. It's totally lazy.
So it's a very bad heresy.
It's, to me, it's noxious, and the most profound point maybe of all, our kids aren't buying that. You know what?
No, they're not.
Unless
No, they're not.
unless you controlled all of the propaganda swirling around your young children, meaning sent them to very expensive private Christian schools where evolution was looked at as the devil and science was shunned, unless you sent them to those Christian schools and then followed that up by sending them to Christian colleges where you paid a fortune for an education that was anti-intellectual with regards to the natural sciences, unless you did that, your kids are sniffing this out. They're sniffing it out. And so not only is biblical literalism lazy, it's mostly only defended by white European men, but it's not going down well in the next generation. They're not taking it. And so argue as we may about where to draw the lines now, the argument is over.
Yeah.
Science is not antithetical to theology.
But
It isn't.
Fundamentalists use science in a very picky way.
Oh, very
it's
selective.
Like,
Sure.
oh, this is great because this supports my idea, which is not intellectually honest. It's like you use science to your convenience.
You pick and
No,
choose.
yeah.
You pick and choose. Yes, you do. You pick and choose. Do we do that? Oh, of course we do that. Of course we do. But here's where I'm coming at it. Bishop Spong articulates these different views of understanding of God. The very earliest notions of God that we have preserved for us in the Torah it's a tribal God who hates all of our enemies.
Yeah.
Then you move into the minor prophets, and it becomes a God who's moved by justice and injustice.
Right.
Eventually, right before the reset of the New Testament and that gap there, we begin to hear from the minor prophets about a God who is moved by love, a God who might even be able to be summarized as love. So God isn't changing. And then we get to the New Testament, which is a fleshy God who literally opens channels of access to all. Well, that would be Jesus. That's my favorite of them all. But it's not that God is changing, it's that our ability to conceive of the nature of God and the cosmos is evolving as it should. So
And it's always evolving. We resist that now. It's in the Bible.
There were countless models that tried to hold reality together in the Bible. We've got dozens of models in the Bible. We read them as if they're all one thing. It's actually it's a really lazy way to read it. We have to do better work than that. And so here's what I think I've always sniffed out about theologians who look at the Bible as literal. Everything they do is defensive. It's defensive. They want to defend a simplistic story that was ancient poetry, and they want to make that the basis of all knowledge, and it just doesn't pass the smell test. Okay, so Mary's on, so Stan.
We have so Stan say
This is the Mary Johnson, Stan Mitchell, Cesar and Jason podcast. It's good to see you guys.
We have some stuff here. Mary Johnson, she said literalism is used to discount Christianity so they can ignore the truth the Bible has tried to teach.
So yeah, I think the Bible actually teaches an open posture. It teaches active pursuit of understanding the Godhead. It doesn't teach a finally revealed, fully encapsulated version of anything.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't even these guys don't even refer to God in the same language. This doesn't even come in some cases from the same millennia. Certainly many centuries apart, but we compress it and we think it, and then we use it to explain it, and we'll use Daniel, who was from a totally different planet than the New Testament. It's just, guys, it's silliness.
We love to make very nice Christian
Collages, yeah. Anyway.
Mary Johnson adds, science loves questions and encourages them to be asked. So should the church. Okay, I'm sorry. Because my broken
Don't be sorry.
English. And Stan, there's a long text.
Stan says, let me see if I can read it. Can you put it over here? Where two or three,
Let's see here.
where two or three, Jesus did say, the truth will set you free. While scientific, factual, and historical types of truth are legitimate, they are not the only types of truth. I can read 3 pages from a botanical dictionary about roses, and that is an experience of truth. I can read Yeats's or Burns or Blake, slide up, poetry, and I smell the rose. The latter is my sense of the Bible. And I like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, if anything, when we read our text, what we ought to be able to do, this is to your point, Stan, is we ought to be able to walk away with a notion of divinity when we see it and feel it.
But you know,
Yeah.
taking one word that Stan is pointing in his comment, Christians don't like to approach the Bible as a poetry. They don't like to approach
Yeah.
the Bible taking
As a metaphor,
as
right.
a metaphor. They like to go there and see factual things, which is not the purpose of the writings.
Yeah. I mean,
I love the poem in Genesis 1.
right.
But you know, in several contexts, if I said that is a poem, which is in fact, it's not my perception, it is a poem.
Yeah, it's classic Hebrew, early Hebrew
poetry.
right.
So, but you know, we need
Yeah.
to open to approach the Bible in a more creative way.
I think and somebody asked this question in the open forum after the 11 o'clock service. Someone said, where are the guardrails?
We are what?
The guardrails, los límites.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and I think it's a legitimate question, and it came from an honest heart. Where are the guardrails? If we begin to say this wasn't what we thought it was, this is poetry and metaphor, where are the guardrails? I just want to acknowledge again that it's built into the operating system to not ask these questions because you might undo the whole thing. Like we're taught, don't pull on any loose threads because you might undo the entire sweater. And I think the truth is that whether we've told ourselves not to or not, we always have. And I think real truth holds up to scrutiny. And so I think the point is to approach it with a posture that would say, a humble posture that would say, I'm seeking a better model of understanding the nature of God and the cosmos. I think that's what most of us are actually doing. And I see the invitation in Scripture to do that. I think Scripture is exactly that. It's the result of people doing just that. Now, we think it's hard right now. Imagine how hard it would have been if you'd have been one of the original disciples. All you're working with is the Torah and Jewish text, and some history and some poetry and some of the prophets' writings. And now you have to make sense of this man you actually knew. He lived on such and such a street. Like, y'all hung out, right? Y'all went to the river together, right? So actively seeking new models, I think, is the posture of discipleship. It isn't deconstruction. It's discipleship.
Yeah.
And I think it's also honest. And I claim, I crave at this point in my life intellectual honesty. I want to be able to stand squarely in the academy where science is developing under our feet without blushing that you know what my day job is. And I think there's a way to do that.
For sure.
And I think that offering that permission to our people, I think is going to bring some great life. And I think it'll probably offer some permission to some younger people who can't pinch their nose hard enough to come to church because it all feels ancient and mythological. It all feels musty to them. Huele a humedad, huele a vejez, huele a viejo. And so I invite the conversation. I invite all of this scrutiny. We don't have it. We never have to have it fully right. But I will seek for ways to account for what I know to be true. Like Stan says, you can read Yeats describing a rose, and you can bring an awareness of a rose into your mind. It's as real as anything that you've ever touched. And that's what the text can do if we hold it right. It can do that. It's a beautiful story. It just isn't as mechanical and brittle as I was told that it would be. It isn't as brittle. So someone prophesied to me when I waltzed off to seminary someone said, you're going to lose your faith. And they were right. I lost their faith. But I found one that works for me that isn't anti-intellectual. That's I constantly want to read on the front edge of science and discovery. I do not wince at all in the presence of hardcore scientists pulling down new concepts. There isn't any defensiveness around how I hold my ancient texts that would say, don't watch the stars, don't look at the atoms, don't look deeply into the earth, don't pay attention to the meteorological change, don't pay attention to new models of understanding the human psyche. Nothing in me wants to hide from that. So, do you have another question?
No.
Let's see. I tell my kids apocryphal stories. See if you can find it. So I tell my kids apocryphal stories I can barely see of family lore. Sometimes they incredulously ask, did that really happen? I answer, well, I'm not sure, but I know it is true. That's how stories work. Yeah. Award-winning poetry would fail as science or history. You just moved it. I can't see it. The failure is not inherent to the form.
That's all I have.
Yeah. Okay.
But
we got to come up with a more sophisticated way to read these quotes. I feel dumb sitting here trying to read these in tiny print. Stan, you know I can't see, dude. I can barely see Caesar. I think it's Caesar.
Mi amigo está ciego.
Yeah, I'm just struggling. But anyway, welcome to the conversation. It's going to be fun. We're going to talk about Noah and the Tower of Babel.
I'm so excited about this series.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome.
I don't know how we swerve into these fun ideas, but it just feels important. And so we're here for it. Welcome.
Awesome.
All right. Mary, Stan, go have a good day. Toodaloo.